Hey there, this is Seth Juarez coming to you from the Washington State Convention Center for Build 2017 edition, and we cannot have a session. We cannot go without having a session about Visual Studio. And so this is all a Visual Studio Q&A. And so if you have any questions, this is all for you. Please submit your questions online. I am watching for them all the time, and those are probably one of the most important, at least for me and for you folks. So why don't we start by introducing ourselves. We'll start with you, Amanda, then Saqib, and then Tim.
Sure. My name is Amanda Silver, and I'm the Director of Program Management for Visual Studio, VS Code, and a whole bunch of different technologies like our tools for Windows, JavaScript, that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. Saqib.
Hi, I'm Saqib Shaikh. I'm a software engineer from the AI and Artificial Intelligence and Research Group, and I'm working on a project to help visually impaired people using artificial intelligence.
Fantastic. And Tim?
Yeah, I'm Tim Sneath. I'm Principal Program Manager in the Visual Studio team. I work for Amanda, and I do a small subset of all the cool things she does.
Fantastic. So I feel like, Saqib, you're kind of a celebrity. You were on stage last year with that really cool cognitive services demo. Tell us a little bit about that. Where has that gone since then?
It's an ongoing research project. As you said, we're using the cognitive services and also other artificial intelligence technology from Microsoft to see how can we describe different images and describe the world to people with a visual impairment. Fantastic.
So let's start with Visual Studio. Obviously, it's a very important tool if you're writing stuff for AI and R. How does a developer who happens to be blind write code in Visual Studio? What are some of the affordances that we've done to make Visual Studio work? We'll talk to you first, Saqib.
Okay. So for the most part, coding just like everyone else would. Can't use a mouse, so I'm using the keyboard and have a screen reader reading everything that's going on.
So how do you do that so fast? I mean, like, because I'm listening to the screen reader, it's really fast. You must be way smarter than I am in order to process. Because I'm listening to the sound and I'm like, oh my goodness, someone fast forwarded something. How does that work? Why don't you give us a demo of how you actually would program yourself?
Okay, sure, can do that.
Let's go to the screen.
As you said, the computer just speaks really fast. That's how I've set it, so that I can get more work done.
I see.
And then I also use a very robotic voice because that can scale to faster speeds more easily.
Okay.
And doesn't get stuck on non-human words like code. So what should we do? Shall we create a new project?
Let's
Why
do
not? Here we go.
Oh, I didn't even understand what he was saying. I'm like, I'm literally sitting there like, dang, man.
I can slow it down for you.
I mean, I want to see how it works for you.
Okay, let's do this. So, yeah, so for example, we could write a little Hello World program, but to do something more interesting, let's make it a talking Hello World.
Okay.
So we're going to add a reference. And as I'm moving around, it's reading all the things that get focused. So.
Oh my goodness! Like you must like. Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but do you listen to like Audible? Like it's super. You must be like I listen to Audible on slow speed, and I'm having a hard time. Right? Are you listening to Audible and like consuming books like at a record pace? Like, like this guy is the smartest guy in the world. Like seriously, how do you understand all of that?
AJ, just build it up over time. It's like it's raw productivity. The faster you get stuff into your ears.
Fantastic. All right, so you were doing some more stuff, some coding.
Yeah, let's just see a bit of actually writing code, for example. So as I'm cursing down, it's just reading whatever it's on that line. Even though maybe it doesn't sound like it. So let's write one-line program, for example. And it's reading the IntelliSense as well, which is so cool. And if we run this, then it's going to speak in a more human voice. Any minute now.
Here we go.
Hello, world.
Yay, there you go.
Nice.
Okay.
So we had the professor from that. What was that guy? He has that robot voice that he just loved. Stephen Hawking. They told him, you could have a normal voice. Like, no, I want this robot voice.
Yeah, like that is his voice.
Fantastic. So tell us about the work that we've done, Amanda, with accessibility for Visual Studio.
Yeah, I mean, so what we've been trying to do is actually to make Visual Studio more usable for folks like Saqib. So we've, always Visual Studio has been somewhat accessible. Maybe you can actually speak to that, Saqib, in terms of how it's been so far for you and how it's improved recently.
For sure. It's been accessible for, many years. However, there have been these little frustrations. Sometimes, you're coding and you find this small area where it says unlabeled, or something. And the Visual Studio team has gone through over the past year and looked at systematically how can you identify those areas and add those labels or make it work with high contrast or with the keyboard. So that's been really good, and some that's coming out now in 15.3, and Amanda tells me, it's ongoing work for the future versions beyond that.
Yeah, but it's also been really inspiring to watch him actually use our product and kind of, learn how he uses it, with different abilities. I think it's actually generated a whole bunch of different ideas for us around how we can make Visual Studio more usable, not just for folks like Saqib, but really, I think there'll be general usability enhancements.
That'd be great.
Tim, why don't you speak to that a little bit as well? What kind of efforts are we putting into this kind of work?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that we started doing. We had this big push in general around just improving accessibility.
Right.
And so one of the ways to do that, of course, is just to go through the product systematically and say, well, does this work? Is this accessible or not? Does this have the right metadata associated with it? Is this button keyboard accessible or not?
Right.
And so we've gone through and we found, literally thousands, because it's a huge, sophisticated product, thousands of little micro abrasions, shall we say, in the product where it just doesn't quite sort of do things right. And so we've been checking those things in. And because of the way that Visual Studio 2017 is really an ongoing wave of product delivery, we've already shipped 3 big versions of it, and we're continuing to invest on it. Some of those things are things that we've been just working on.
Right.
But then, in general, we've also just been looking at specific areas where we knew this was inaccessible before, right? The debugger was an area where we knew we had to do more than just minor fixes. We knew we actually had to build accessibility into the products. And then as we've been talking all week, it's been really awesome just hearing Saqib talk about the various different places where we might think we're accessible from a some kind of standard, some kind of scorecard kind of basis, but in practice we're not doing the right things, and we're not doing things in a very helpful way. There are places, the one we found earlier in this week, there's the main editor window. Whenever you tab to it from the screen reader software that he uses, it tells you this is a visual representation of the text contained in this window, or something ridiculous like that.
That's way too much text.
And every time he goes there, it tells you that same stupid message. And so we created a bug on Wednesday night, was it, Saqib?
Yeah.
And by Thursday night, we had a patch DLL for that's now going to check into the next update for the 15.3 preview that gets rid of that stupid message that might have been technically an accessibility aid, but in practice was just a complete PITA. So
That's going to be awesome.
And tell me about the evolution, Saqib, of actual Visual Studio. Is it getting better? Are there some things that you would like to see that would make it more accessible for you?
I always have my personal list, but yes, it's getting better. And it's just been great working with the engineers in Visual Studio, being able to show them what some of the challenges are, and then they're just great at looking at how they can improve that. And as we get beyond the basics, there's been a whole bunch of really nice ideas how we could take this to the next level, and I'm so excited.
That's awesome. Like I said, on the back of our badges, if we work for Microsoft, it says that our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more.
Yeah.
And that includes everyone who maybe happens to be blind, or maybe doesn't have a hand, or maybe whatever.
Well, it's not just that. It's also, when you think about the power of enabling developers and what developers can do, that's a force multiplier.
Absolutely.
And that's why we do what we do.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get into the questions here. Is there any project to make a Visual Studio Mobile to code remotely like a client? I'm not sure I understand that one all the way. Anyone can parse that one?
Visual Studio Mobile to code remotely like a client. I'm not sure I understand it either.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand. Maybe like a thin version of Visual Studio. Do we have one that just writes like code? Like just a thin Visual Studio code?
Okay. So, one of the ideas that has been kind of thrown around there a lot, and there are tools that are out there that are kind of like web-hosted editors, and we even have some of them in the Azure portal, for example. So we've done some tooling like that, and actually a lot of the kind of core code that runs in the Azure portal is the core Genesis that then later became VS Code.
Right.
But one of the things that we've found is that basically developers really like to have extreme high, throughput for their editor. I mean, if you think about something that does word processing, code processing is actually very similar. We do a ton of static analysis on the code as you write it, and runtime analysis, all different kinds of analysis. And so it's really important that we have absolutely the quickest kind of feedback loop that we possibly can with the system that it's running on.
Got it.
So while we do have pretty proficient editors that are hosted in web browser environments, we still believe that the best development experience is going to be in a rich client.
Got it. And like I said, we have Visual Studio Code for those other scenarios I was attempting to make a really fun joke about code and Visual Studio, and it just didn't work. Now you're laughing.
We're laughing anyways.
Now you're laughing at me. Bill Walter,
might be better than the joke itself. I don't know.
Bill Walter asks, I am still using VS 2015 Pro. Can I easily move to VS 2017 Pro with ongoing project? Can some team members on the same project remain in Visual Studio 2015? Is it a side-by-side?
Yes.
Nice. I mean, I want you to be a little more definitive the next time, man, okay? That one was kind of funny. Steven asks, I would love to see higher design tools in VS, something like Sol, PRJ, CLS. I don't know what those are, architecture diagrams. Any plans you can talk of? Thanks. Can you describe, I don't know what those are. I'm guessing they're like a way of drawing architecture.
I think
so it's basically like
class architecture.
Yeah. So we've had architecture tools in Visual Studio in the past, and actually continue to have a series of different tools like the class diagram tool and things like that that are in Visual Studio. Definitely.
And those are still in there, but are they in a different SKU?
Some of them are exclusive to the enterprise SKUs. So that's true.
The other thing I'd say is in this space, the one of the things that makes Visual Studio stand out from almost any other developer tool is the extensibility on offer, right? So we have this huge partner ecosystem that supports Visual Studio. We have a partner program. We've got like 1,300 extensions right now, just a couple of months after we shipped Visual Studio 2017 for VS 2017 that add all of those kinds of things, everything from new languages to richer visualizations and designers and people. We're literally getting 100 a week from different people who are adding that kind of thing. Fantastic.
Next, any chance we'll see T4 tools get some love?
This one's pretty high up on the user voice. I know we keep looking at it and trying to figure out what to do with T4. It's not my area particularly, but it's there's a great thing on user voice that I'd probably just suggest to people that they go and glom onto the user voice. So it's visualstudio.uservoice.com, and that's the place where we put all of our suggestions. It's like a giant suggestion box. They're categorized by
people
different areas, and you
stuff,
upvote stuff. And so I'd say go tell us what you want. Tell us what's broken there for you.
All right, Bill Walter says, for the last decade, the SSD TBI has taken months to sometimes years to come out for the next version of VS. Is there going to be an SSRS report viewer for ASP.NET MVC core application to allow presenting SQL reports in core applications? Is that a Visual Studio question?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that's more of a data tools platform.
Yeah, it is more of a data tools platform.
Good question. I know that they came up with a new release just a couple of weeks ago of SSDT.
Yep.
I don't know about what
Love it. So I'm going to move on. I should have read that one a little bit faster. But the long ones, I can only read like the beginning because I cannot read as fast as Saqib hears, apparently.
I'm going to say he must be so bored with us because we're like talking like 60 words a minute.
I need to talk faster.
Can you talk very quickly about the next question?
All right, and this one is, I think, Saqib, you can answer this one. As developers, what is the best advice you can give that we should be aware of when wanting to make our apps more accessible? That's for you, Saqib.
Okay, so
definitely.
There's a whole bunch of material out there on implementing accessibility APIs. So if you're writing a XAML app, you should use UI automation, and you can specify all the metadata about your controls. So if you implement that, and then make sure that you can use it without a mouse, maybe just put the mouse in your drawer for a while, and turn on the high contrast and make sure it looks good.
I see.
But so much documentation out there as well.
And where's this documentation again for those that want to go look?
Oh, of course, Microsoft.com/accessibility.
So this is like a root thing for us. It's something I know that for us, for example, in Channel 9, we were told everything needs to be accessible. Everything needs to have what are those things called at the bottom of a video? Help me out. I'm blanking out. Subtitles.
Yes.
Yes.
What's that? Captions. Thank you. I've been here all day, folks. And so we need to have captions on all the videos. And so we're doing a lot of work for accessibility. It's a really good question. Yeah. All right. Next question from Jason. Any plans to add more WPF controls and adding support for charting controls in WPF?
Always controls.
So we don't have, we actually have been, earlier this week, actually, even in the keynote, there was an announcement around Telerik adding some additional, control support for touch controls and data grid and things like that. So, I think we're certainly focused on kind of the controls that are accessible and kind of integrated with the modern environment of Windows 10.
And like I said, I used to work for a control vendor. And so there's a really rich ecosystem of tools that you can already look at, I think, that are available out there.
And as you said, Infragistics, DevExpress, Telerik. The Telerik ones in particular are kind of worthy of calling out right now just because they've open sourced their controls and they've got this whole toolkit for UWP apps. So yeah, I think we feel like there's so many good partners out there. It's not really our job to try and compete with partners who are themselves doing such a great job in that space. So.
Awesome. So let's, by the way, please keep your questions coming. I'm going to start hogging their time for a little bit here, if that's okay. What are some of the things in Visual Studio 2017 that you want to call out that are compelling to get people to say, I should move up?
Yeah.
We'll start with you, Tim.
So I'm going to just be very selfish and talk about an area that I've spent a lot of time working on recently, which is just getting onboarded with Visual Studio. The thing that we probably put almost as much time as anything else in this release was the installation experience. A lot of people have not such a great experience or memory of installing Visual Studio 2015. It was pretty big. Like the smallest installation was 6 gigabytes in size.
Right.
It took a while. It was sometimes a little error prone, and it was updating was also pretty tough.
It was a lunchtime endeavor. It was. Shall we put it so?
Yeah. If you have a long lunch,
free martini lunch.
I want to do that lunch.
Yeah.
That would be a good so we did this huge re-architecture with Visual Studio 2017. We took the product. We broke it down into modules. Everything in Visual Studio now is an extension. That's how we did it. We essentially said, let's treat everything like it's a v6, a .vsix file. And so now that's enabled us to be much more declarative about the different things that need other components. The impact for that is for the smallest install of Visual Studio, it's now a couple of 100 megabytes. It installs in literally like a minute. We've been looking at sort of like telemetry where people share it with us. We're looking at a minute to 2 minutes for the smallest installation. Updates as well. Like if you go from 15.1 to 15.2 or 15.3, the different dot releases, they're just often like a few minutes to get from one to another. And we've really streamlined that process. And so for me, that's a big thing, right? Because if it's a pain to install, if it's a pain to update, why would you do it? So it's not so much a feature as a key part of the process.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing I would add on top of it is just general productivity enhancements. We've really focused a lot on improving the performance of Visual Studio in this version.
Of course.
So one of the things that we've introduced is something called lightweight solution load. A lot of people that we see out there use Visual Studio with a solution that might have hundreds of projects and hundreds of files in those projects. And when you're loading that much and we're doing all kinds of analysis on that code, it can take some time to open those projects.
Sure.
And so what we've done is we've kind of started to look at how we can do lightweight solution load so that we only load the projects and the files that your file that you're coding on has a dependency on.
I see.
And in the RTM version, or the launch version in March, that was an option that you could go in and enable, but it was turned off by default. And in the more recent previews, we've actually experimented with turning that on based on the size of your solution. Mm-hmm. So we've improved performance a lot, and that's just one of many, many other places that we've worked on performance. But we've also added all kinds of things that improve your coding experience and your debugging experience. Right. So we've introduced a whole bunch of different new refactoring capabilities in Visual Studio. We have one of my favorite features of 2017 is the run-to-click capability in the in the debugger. So, if you're hitting a breakpoint, but you want to kind of change the cursor, it used to be that you would have to right-click and say, like, run to cursor or something like that. Now we actually have a little glyph that just shows up in your editor, and you just hit play to that point. And that's just a really nice productivity enhancement that kind of makes it a lot easier to use.
Awesome. Saqib, have you noticed improvements from 2015 to 2017?
Definitely in terms of the accessibility, but then there's so many small little features. I think like the find references to a particular method, that's really improved. I really like that experience. So all these little things add up, and I really like that.
Awesome. All right, well, back to some questions. Is there any roadmap for a 64-bit Visual Studio? This always comes up.
It does.
It does. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's still on the table for us to continue to consider. I think we're still kind of looking at whether or not it really will make an impact in terms of people's day-to-day productivity. I think we can actually, for a lot of folks, have a very, very fast, responsive environment with the 32-bit Visual Studio.
Yeah.
And obviously, the Visual Studio itself has pieces of code that's in it that's, 20 years old or something like that. So there's a lot of code to actually
definitely older than all of us here. Right?
Yeah.
Nice. So are there any features that you'd like to call out that maybe they're features that you know about that people just haven't used or you wish they would use more often? Tim, we'll start with you. What are some Visual Studio features? And this may not be just a 2017 thing. Maybe it's something. What is something that you really like that maybe people don't use as often? Tim, we'll start.
Well, so the one that to me is I'm just really getting geeked out about is the support for Windows plus the Linux subsystem and building C++ applications using Visual Studio for Linux on Windows. Like, it's this kind of crazy sort of combination. But
like cats and dogs living together as friends at the Poconos, on a kayak, and we're trying to figure out how this works, right?
Yeah. So it's really coming together. Last year it was sort of, we had it, but there's a whole bunch of new things in 2017 and beyond that really help with that as an environment. And so now, you can build with Clang, with GCC, using the inbuilt on disk Linux subsystem, and that to me is just a really cool environment.
And Amanda, I think you did a demo like this with me last year, but it pushed it into a VM.
That's right.
Now it's pushing it direct into Windows user space with Pico processors,
That's
which is
right.
WSL.
Right.
That's
awesome. All right, Saqib, is there a little-known feature that people should be using in Visual Studio that you like?
It's not a new thing, but I love the amount of keyboard shortcuts. It means you can zip around so quickly. And I guess what's new, C#7. I like a lot of those new features.
Yeah, C#7 is pretty amazing. I did a video with Mads on this one where we just because we do a lot of videos like, look at this. I actually went into a code base that I wrote, and I'm like, all right, let's fix this in the C#7. And it was kind of fun to see what it actually looked like. So thank you for that. Amanda, features for you.
I think for me, the big thing that I'm really excited about right now is thinking about how development can change when you're in a team environment, and even the developer inner loop changes when you're in a team environment, so that, if you think about stuff that might happen during your CI process, there might be static analysis that runs as part of your build. How can we actually bring that into the developer inner loop so that you don't have to wait for a check-in to get that feedback? And that's something that really matters to a lot of different teams, because you might be onboarding a brand new dev that's a college hire, let's say, and they have to learn about the coding practices of your team. Or it also matters for folks who are much more senior and collaborating.
Or me, like I've been writing demoware for the last 5 years. I need to write production code. They need to teach me how to do this.
Right. So part of this is a whole series of features that we've been adding, and a lot of them are still in preview mode, but will be coming out soon. But basically, they allow you to have a continuous integration pipeline that gives you feedback back into the IDE.
I see. All right. So to finish up, we have about 90 seconds left. What are some things that we should look forward to in Visual Studio? What are some of the comments that have come in? What should we do as we orient ourselves to the future of Visual Studio, Tim?
The future. Well, I think you're just going to continue to see us hitting any different platforms. You're going to see us expanding out to new scenarios. The mobile piece obviously continues to grow. We're doing some huge stuff with Xamarin and the live, I forget what it's called now, the live thingy.
We use the word thingy too much as technical people. I used it. They were making fun of me, like, you're a technical guy and you use the word thingy. Yes.
Yeah, that's it for me.
Thingy. Saqib, what are some things? You got 2 people here that work on Visual Studio. What would you like to see in Visual Studio?
Wow, so much. I have a whole list of accessibility features. Let's start with that.
Nice. So there's a bunch of accessibility things. What about you, Amanda, as we look to the future?
Obviously a lot of productivity features. We will just continue to hit the hammer on that. But I think embracing development as a team sport, and especially now that everybody's using a developer environment that's typically connected as they use it, I think we can actually have a much better developer environment that's more interactive with what the rest of your team is doing.
Awesome. Well, this has been very helpful. Thanks so much, Amanda, Saqib, and Tim, to All About Visual Studio. Thanks so much for watching. We're going to take just a little break, and then we'll come back with Visual Studio Mobile Center. Have your questions ready. We'll see you after the break. Thanks so much.